Okay, guys, before I get this one started, I just wanted to preface it a little bit by talking about this idea of Gnosticism and the archons being the controllers of our realm. And of course, none of this is new, right? Gnosticism has been around for a couple thousand years, and at least so they tell us, right? And I was looking at this picture, this artist rendition of an archon here, and how much it kind of reminds me of the picture that I took of Baal here mocking me with his middle finger, and has a lion's head that could represent the demiurge Yaldabaoth, and Baal is an archon. And so this whole idea tying Gnosticism into spectroscopy and making a connection to like the church machines and the hydrogen wave function chart and some of the sematics on these church machines and how they could have functioned by modulating frequencies or perhaps even hydrogen or perhaps other chemical elements as well. And tying that into the idea that these archons could have been pulled from the solar spectrum or the Sophian spectrum, right? And how that could possibly be connected to the color patterns of the royal houses and some of the major countries in our narrative, like England and Bohemia, right? Israel and Scotland. And just as a fun little thing, I did this. I connected Edinburgh and Jerusalem. And these numbers here, gematria-wise, don't scream anything out to me. I'm sure there's something there, but I'm also certain I could have done a better placement here. But one thing I wanted to point out is that when you close in on it, in Bulgaria, this line comes awfully close to a place called Sofia in Bulgaria. Those tricky Bulgarian Gnostics. And so making that connection from what the archons are, and what Yaldabaoth was, and that image of him as the giant worm, and being able to connect it to stuff that I find here in Baltimore has really put Baltimore and the narrative that's coming to me in a whole new perspective and giving it a whole new framework that I wasn't quite ready for. I was hoping I would get something like this out of the Jubilee. I just didn't expect it to jump me right from the first day. I couldn't even get into the first day. All of this came from me looking at trying to tie the Jubilee into the equinox. And now it's given me an identity for the worm nights and the color patterns and something that I've been chasing pretty much since the beginning of my show. And it really has me questioning how I want to proceed with my show. And so I'm going to finish up with the Master of Reality series, and maybe I'll do that Equinox episode because I had that one all worked up. But, I really need to consider how I want to move forward, given these new ideas and how drastically they can affect the story. Right? And so, having said all that, this episode is one that I made over a week ago, right on the heels of that Any Color You Like video. And I decided not to post it because I realized I needed to do a lot more with that research. And, it was pretty much almost practically a free association about Yaldabaoth. But while I was thinking about how, now with all of this new information, I was thinking about how to proceed with my show, I realized that, I started my show because I wanted to share my journey as to what I would find by applying Baltimore through the prism of the mud flood false narrative reset paradigm. Right? And this episode definitely has its place in that journey. So I hope you enjoy this one, guys. There probably won't be one the rest of the week, but who knows, maybe there will be. But if there isn't, have a happy Thanksgiving all. And until the next one, cheers, guys.
Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is a continuation of Master of Reality. Okay, this one's all about me and my boy Yaldabaoth. Have fun, guys. Okay, so before I get going on von Fraunhofer here and some of these other guys in the Royal Society, there were a couple of points I wanted to close out on, and that is I cannot remember if I brought this up in an earlier episode, but so I want to bring it up again just because it's tying in further now, and that is that I made an observation that the musical alphabet is represented along with the solar spectrum. You know, your 7 keys, A through G, and that has KH here. And now KH, of course, is not part of our audible musical alphabet. But who knows if there is some correlating inaudible frequency and that and an inaudible musical scale that they can play us like fiddles to. Right? Because who knows the effect these inaudible frequencies could have on us. Right? And I just want to also, so there's that, right? I couldn't remember if I dropped that in or not, so I wanted to put that in. And then I wanted to close out on Yaldabaoth. And I have a lot of work ahead of me. So the idea that there's this demiurge, this being who is creating mankind in our realm by plucking sparks from a harmonious white light, right? And, you know, trying to correlate those sparks to the solar spectrum, you know, and how that could be tied to the color patterns of the royal families, these early dynasty families that all have bloodlines that go back to dragons, right? And so in these early systems, right, the making of the world is ascribed to a company of 7 archons whose names are given, but still more prominent is their chief, Yaldabaoth. Right? At 7, right? So Yaldabaoth plus 6. Right? And in this Apocryphon of John, 2nd century AD, right, the archon has 3 names. Right? Yaldabaoth, right? Sackless. Right? And the third is Samael. And he declares, I am God and there is no other God besides me. That sounds familiar, right? And so he is the demiurge, maker of man, right? And so as he plucks these rays of light, these sparks, and he puts them in the body of man, and I'll explain why he does that in a minute. Yaldabaoth is filled with envy, right? Because he's filled with envy because they have something that he is not, and he cannot, which is part of the pleroma, part of his mother, Sophia. Sophia, who decided to emanate asexually because she had enough of her partner, who was Christ, by the way. And so he is birthed from this, but he is not of it. And so he steals these bits of his mother and the pleroma, which is part of this, and his mother is part of a more harmonious, even a bigger, whiter light. So he steals these sparks and he stuffs them in the meat suits. But now he's filled with envy because he is not of it. He does not have any part of that white light. So he's filled with envy, right? Because he knows that when the meat suits expire, they get to go back. They get to go back into the pleroma after the meat suits expire. And that will leave him with what he does not want, which is, of course, to be alone, because he's the only one. You know, 1 is the loneliest number. Right? You know, Sophia emanates him, but he is not a part of the pleroma. And so he creates friends for himself, and he starts making a reality. But it's still, he's not a part of the light. All he wants to do is be a part of the light. But he can't be. Right? Because Sophia was selfish. Which is interesting given the concept of like the aeons and, you know, this harmony. Right? She commits this selfish act and births the demiurge here who is outside the pleroma, and he can never be a part of it. And even though he gets to make his friends, it's not enough. It's not enough because he's not part of the light. And that's all he wants. So he starts to steal part of it and stuff it in these meat suits, which is a part of this reality he's created for himself, this very moist and earthen good home for the worm. And, but he's still lonely. He's still only got these few friends that he has created. Right? They're not part of the light, these other archons, these 6 other guys. So he wants more, and he wants, maybe it's anger or jealousy, he wants out of that jealousy. He does not want the meat suits to understand that they're part of this other totality, this pleroma, this white light harmony. He doesn't want us to understand that. He doesn't want us looking forward to that. He doesn't want us harnessing that part of ourselves. And so what he does is he creates religion and gets us to worship him and all his friends. It is 7 buddies that he made. And then they create science, right? All in an effort to keep us removed, play the game, keep us from our divine harmony and spark and white light, and take his revenge against his mother, I guess, for emanating him and creating him outside the light. And so they create the university system to shill that science. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't have practical, of course, I mean, it's very real. I mean, this is, it's a part of the game for him. Because you have to understand, he is operating on a vibrational frequency that we cannot comprehend. I mean, we just cannot. And, so this is all part of the game. It's all in the game. And the game is to keep us from the light. Or keep us understanding that we're light. He can't keep us from the light because we're going to die. It's from keeping us from understanding that we're the light. We are the light. And so he uses this science to create outer space. Around. And again, I don't know what space is, if it's a dome, if it's not a dome, is it a projection? I don't know any of that. All I understand is that I think everything I know is wrong. And so if the idea is to keep us distant and separate from our harmony, then making us feel smaller and smaller and smaller and bringing everything down to these atomic levels is a good way to do that. And so creating the concept of this vastness of space and then populating it with the idea of aliens, right? Keeps us further separated from this white light. The way, and now it would get to, and so that's now like the creation myth here. That's kind of setting that up. And when did this happen? What year, is this 8,000 years ago? Because when you look at the ancient religions, you can trace them back, even in some cases, I'm sure tens of thousands of years. And again, sun worship is the name of the game. And could Yaldabaoth be the sun? And so does it go back, that far? Because we don't understand what our history is. We have to understand that on the wavelength, the frequency that we're working at now, we can only really work with what we're given, and so they can change and manipulate the story. It just takes 2 generations. You do it one little step at a time, and especially with the advent of language and reading. That really keeps us separate from the light. Keeps that fractioning of the harmony just more and more, there's more fractures. They get fractures. Keep them divided. Do not let them understand that they are part of this other wholeness. And so that's, I think, what the game is with space. It's just another aspect of keeping us from that wholeness, separating it from us further. And that's what NASA and science fiction and movies and things like that have all been a part of. And they lay the groundwork in the 19th century, because I think, they're hungry and they need a lot of food. And so they're going to create a bunch of populations. They lay the groundwork for it to make it seem reasonable, to make it plausible. In terms of this like outer space stuff. And I'm going to I'm going to wrap this one here, but when I get into like what Bunsen and his buddy Kirchhoff, I think his name was, some of these other guys. But yeah, that's where I'm going to pick this one up next week. And so I really dig the idea, the way this Gnosticism is going and how it could tie into the reset event. If it was even a reset event at all, because, maybe this story only goes back maybe 1,000 years, looking at the way how little we truly understand. And I'm going to be exploring all kinds of elements of this going forward. This was really, I guess, all the way it was supposed to be going this whole time. And so now I cannot wait, because now I get to tie in these figures like this to the demiurge and Gnosticism, and the idea that the earliest religions were just the first attempt to fool us, to keep us separate from the light or understanding of the light, or to orient us maybe from, I like that. He stole us, and the first step of orientation into our meat soup process is the introduction of these gods, his pals, the archons. And all because he didn't want to be alone. And so I think it's being able to tie this angle going forward into the Jubilee and Baltimore. It's unbelievable. So I'm just super excited for the future. I cannot wait to get back. I still have to close out Master Reality. I'm going to get to the people in the Royal Society and the electrifying conclusion. I might play it a little bit slower and stretch it out to like 5 or 6. We'll see. But, because now I think this is episode 4 already. There may even be 7. Maybe to match the number of archons. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a blast, and until the next one, cheers, guys.